I think that we have to think about Colombia in the context of the Trump administration's sort of broader attack on judges, law firms, cultural institutions like the Smithsonian. This idea that any any kind of independent thought or critical analysis or reflection is suspect because of the way that it might challenge his white nationalist project. I think in terms of like the cultural institutions like the Smithsonian, they're trying to rewrite history and obliterate memory in all kinds of ways. And I think, yeah, at Colombia, what was most surprising to me was the rapidity with which the administration gave in to his demands. And one of the things that I have since thought about that is that a lot of people in the in the media have talked about this as capitulation. But I have a colleague, Steve Striffler, who makes the argument that complicity is really a better way to understand what's going on than capitulation. Because capitulation really rests on the assumption that university administrators are really there to fight for free speech and critical thought and so forth. And I don't think there's a lot of evidence for that. They're often working at the behest of very conservative boards of trustees, individuals who come from the worlds of business and finance, where upholding free speech, critical thought, dialogue, analysis, and so forth is not what they're about. It's about making money. So the fact that administrators caved so fast to Trump is not a surprise, but I think it's maybe better understood, as my colleague Professor Striffler argues, as complicity. The idea that even though these folks were not necessarily, didn't necessarily vote for Trump or not necessarily MAGA Republicans, that they saw his demands as an opportunity to control unruly students and to increase the university's capacity to control student protests, to control academic departments that might be problematic. I think in the New York Times and other places, we've been sort of seeing references to the need for a course correction, the idea that student protests went too far, that faculty are too liberal. And it may be that Trump's demands provided administrators with a cover to do what they may have wanted to do all along.
Certainly, President Biden helped lay the groundwork for all that.
Yeah, of course. And I think we're really seeing that, this kind of complicity, capitulation, whatever you want to call it, is not working. And to date, Colombia has not gotten back their federal funding. I guess they're still in negotiations about it, but it certainly didn't result in an immediate restoration of their funding. And yeah, I think really that universities need to figure out a way to get together and to fight this collectively. I'm not sure that's going to happen. These universities compete with each other for students, for faculty, for national rating points. So I'm not optimistic about their ability to, create a united front about this. But I think historically it hasn't been university administrators who've been the ones who stand up for freedom of speech. It's been students and faculty. I mean, think about the Berkeley free speech movement of 1964. There you had students who were protesting university limitations on both what they could say on campus as well as their involvement in civil rights struggles off campus. And they won quite a bit, and as a result of expanding the space for debate and dialogue in campus, that paved the way for some of the big Vietnam War debates and protests. So I think, historically, it's really has not been administrators who have you know, protected academic freedoms, and I don't think we should be expecting Columbia administrators to do that today. I think also that one of the first mistakes that they made at Columbia was to accept this Trump administration definition of anti-Semitism as basically being a criticism of Israel, and thus using it as a kind of a wedge issue to go after student protesters who were protesting the Gaza genocide. And it's really ironic that one of the most anti-Semitic administrations in U.S. history would use anti-Semitism to target student protesters, many of whose leaders are Jewish. So, but unfortunately, Columbia kind of accepted that, or at least the administration did, and that didn't help.
That was again delivered to Trump on a platter by Biden, anti-Semitic. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. But Biden was, yeah, definitely. Biden laid the groundwork for this, and I also think that decades of neoliberalism, or that's to say, the idea of this irrational belief in the ability of the market to solve all problems, that has really corroded higher education and made it easier for these sorts of things to happen, because we see university administrators becoming less out of the ranks of faculty and more from the worlds of finance and business and so forth. We see a shift more towards profit and what do they call it at Vanderbilt? Learning outcomes, where it's all this kind of market-driven mentality that then marginalizes the humanities and the social sciences, and kind of makes education more about training for a profession rather than learning how to think critically. So students become so careerism kind of replaces the idea of the collective good. And I think this has been affecting universities for a long time, where education is more seen as a commodity and less as a public good.